Okay, so we're going to do a number of shorter lessons involving one of my PhD students, and she will introduce herself soon. But as I've said before, we can learn about research methods in all sorts of ways. But I think it's really good to be talking with people, with students and with researchers who have learned how to do it. And so, can I ask you to introduce yourself to our students?
Sure. Hi, my name is Pakamo Nansiriwat, and I am studying at the University of Cambridge, doing my PhD there at the Center of Development Studies. And right now I'm in the process of writing up my research, my dissertation, and hopefully submitting soon.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few questions and let's just get started.
Yes.
Okay, so we've done we've done a bit of work on what a research question is, aims and objectives and all that kind of stuff. Could you just briefly tell me what your project is about and what your research question is?
Sure. So, as you know, my research is on nationalism, and particularly on the nationalism that exists in the local context of Pattani, which is the conflict-ridden southern border provinces of Thailand. And what I focus on specifically is how the youths, the Na-Yu youths, which are, some scholars, they use the term Malay Muslims, but I use the term that is used by the local population, which is Na-Yu, which comes from Malayu. And I look at how the Malayu youths understand or come to terms with understanding the sub-nationalism, or in some contexts, in some literature, they call it the counter-nationalism, which is the nationalism in the local level. So we're talking here about Pattani Malayu nationalism and how it affects the youth.
When you say youth, what age range?
So I define my youth range as to be around 16 to 30 years old, because up to 30, as you know, some people are still, in this schooling system. Some people are still working within youth organizations and associations, and more or less they identify as being youth still.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so we've heard a bit about your kind of research topic.
Yes.
So you're interested in Na-Yu youth,
Yes.
in Pattani. Tell me about, what is this question that you've asked? Yeah.
So my research question is, what exactly is Pattani Malayu nationalism? What we hear of, what exactly is it? And how influential are these ideologies towards Na-Yu youths at present?
Okay, so we've got the topic and the question. Okay, so tell me next about your research methods. How are you going to get the data that is going to answer that question?
So my research methods is basically a mixed methods research, and I first start off with focus groups to design, to outline, to kind of outline what the themes are, that the themes of the narratives of what makes up Pattani Malayu nationalism from the youths. Then I designed a survey, which is my first survey, conducted the survey, then I conducted in-depth interviews.
So you did. You finally did in-depth interviews.
Yes.
Okay. So when you say mixed, that's mixed, quantitative, qualitative.
That's correct.
Cool. Okay. So tell me about the qualitative aspect. What did you do?
So for the qualitative aspect, I actually had to spend a lot of time getting to know people because I didn't know anyone. As a girl, as a woman from Bangkok, I did not know anyone, so I had to spend the time to get to know people. And then I was able to interview key people who would talk to me about Pattani Malayu nationalism.
So how many qualitative interviews did you conduct?
I conducted over 150 qualitative interviews for the for, for the research.
And you did them all yourself?
Yes, for the interviews, the qualitative interviews, I believe that it was very important to do it by myself.
Did you have any help?
I did have help. When I went down to Pattani for the first time, what I did was I established a research team in which it consists of around 10 people who I got to know from Rashapat Yala, actually. And after spending some time with them, getting to know them, we worked together as a team to conduct the first quantitative aspect of the research. So we went down to different sites and to survey the youths in different areas.
Okay, tell me more. This is still about methodology. So that's really interesting because as an anthropologist, I almost never do focus groups, but I do it at the end because I want to kind of make sure that I've got everything. But tell me more about whereabouts you conducted all of these surveys and these interviews.
So as I said, my research is multi-sited, and I had to do a sampling process where it was more or less a brainstorm with the local population, with the local help that I had with the research team. And we talked about the different sizes of, schools and communities that had been affected directly with intense violence throughout the 14 years, and communities that did not have that much intensity in terms of violence. And then from then on, we kind of drew it down into selected numbers of survey sites.
So how many survey sites did you do?
We did approximately 40.
40.
Yes, 40 different sites throughout mainly Yala and Pattani provinces.
And so that's the survey, that's the quantitative part of it.
Yes.
Were those places the places that you did the qualitative aspects as well?
Yes, so basically, after conducting the surveys, what we did was we asked the respondents who was willing to talk to us in an in-depth interview. So that way, I had both quantitative data from that particular survey group, as well as qualitative interviews as well from respondents within that group.
Okay, great. So that's your methodology.
Yes.
That's your sampling in terms of like numbers, in terms of place. That's really good. So we'll leave it at that, and
Thank
we'll
you.
talk again soon.
All right.
Okay, keep tuned. We'll talk again soon. Okay, so we're going to talk to Nan just a bit more about her experience of field work. Okay, so as an anthropologist, I love talking about field work.
Yeah.
Could you tell me about, what was had you ever conducted field work before?
Actually, this was my first extensive research. I've never, as I said earlier, I've never been to Pattani, which is my research site, and I did not really know many people. So I had to spend as much time as possible to get to know the people within the area and within the communities.
But how did you feel? If you're from Bangkok, you're not from Pattani, you've never done this before. How did you feel before you got started? And how did you get started? I mean, were you terrified? Were you excited?
I was more or less excited. I still remember the first day of landing in Narathiwat Airport very clearly and making my way to Masjid Klang, Pattani. That's where I started to get to know people who are working in different civil organizations, because they had a very big event at the masjid called Pesta Pattani on that day. So that was my first day, and it was very important for me to spend as much time to get to know different people from different organizations working within the conflict zone, to spend time with them, to let them get to know me, which is very important, especially when you're working in conflict zones, as research can be very sensitive.
So did you have how did you know about the event? Did you have people who were local organisers or fixers, or advocates or middle people?
So when I was in Cambridge, when I was writing up my first year report in Cambridge, I had an opportunity to talk to some people who are working in, as activists within the area through Facebook, actually, through social media, where we started our, introductions. And then afterwards, I asked them when was the best opportunity or the best time for me to get to enter Patani and to meet different groups.
Okay, so the students have watched some of the videos from the people that I've worked with in the South, and I've done many, many years of research there. How many months would you say you've done field work for? I know you've come and gone
Yes.
from Bangkok to Patani, but how many months or years has it been?
I would say that, give or take, it would be approximately 2.5 to 3 years in conducting research, because I had basically a 4-step process for the entire research methods, and at the end, I had to conduct a triangulation or a second survey to analyze and compare the results as well from the first survey.
So the 4 parts again were what?
So the first part was
focus group?
Yes, I called it the pilot field work.
Okay.
So that was when I started to introduce myself, started to meet people, spent time there. Then I went back to kind of formulate my ideas and specify exactly what I was interested in. And I came back to conduct the first survey, which I created.
Yep.
And then afterwards, I conducted the in-depth interviews.
Okay, that's the interviews.
Yes, and then the 4th process was my second survey.
Okay, so that's 4 steps.
Yes.
That's 4 steps. Okay, so how did you organise your field work? I mean, was it chaotic? Was it difficult to organise, or was it difficult organising all of the members of your research team? How did you do it?
Well, it took a lot of time, I would say. So as you know, I am quite a patient person. So I take my time, and it was a similar rhythm in the field as well. The cultural rhythm. You have a lot of people who are working at the slow pace, taking their time. But then, whilst taking the time, I ensured that it was thorough, that the time that was taken was not wasted. So I made sure that everything was put into codes, and all the data was separated, and then we had names and names of people who were responsible in keying in or helping me key in or transcribing. So it was quite systematic at the end.
But you had 10 people.
I had 10 people.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yes.
That's great. Okay, so let's leave it there, and we'll have another round with Kunan. Okay. So let's talk a bit more about some of the problems that you've heard. You've told us about your research problem, your research question, your research methods, and all of that important, interesting stuff.
Yes.
But field work is messy.
Yes.
Because field work involves people.
Yes.
So tell me about whether you had any problems conducting field work.
Well, I wouldn't call it a problem per se, but then the process was quite slow, as I had to train everyone within my research team. As I told you earlier, they were students at Ratchapat University. They had no background in conducting research. So we had to go step by step into teaching them, as well as me learning from them as well, about the culture and the customs there, and seeing what to do next in terms of conducting research. So it was quite slow to train people, but then it was very important to do so.
Okay. So are there any other problems that you encountered? Did you ever lose anything?
Oh, yes. Yes, in terms of losing something, as I told you earlier, even though we had a system in place, if we don't keep in touch or keep in, constant contact, at times data can be lost. And from my experience, I lost one of my sampling sites, data set, and that was in one of the private Islamic schools, which, generally it took a while for us to get our, chance to go in to different classes to survey. Then by the time that everything was keyed in to the quantitative programs, we realized that the data was lost and no one basically took responsibility for it. So then we had to find another survey site in order to conduct another survey, over again.
Right, okay. Hey, that's good. So soon we'll be asking whether you, as an experienced researcher, have got any advice. But let's leave it at that and keep tuned. So finally, let's hear whether, Nan, you can give our students a bit of advice.
Yes. As we know, the research process is quite messy, and there's a lot of procedures to go through. And my first advice would be that you would need to take some time to get to know your research site, the people you're working with, and the people that you are hoping to understand or study. So take that time there to develop a relationship, and to develop trust as well, and to be clear from the start what you are there for and why. And I think that, as most researchers would say, to conduct a PhD or an extensive research, you would need to learn different skills. And these different skills, it varies. It could be from learning how to maximize the use of word processor, or for my case, the use of quantitative programs such as SPSS, or to even basic skills such as developing a comfortable environment to conduct interviews and to use a voice recorder and to transcribe. So I would say that if you could use that time to practice these skills before entering the field, that would be very productive for your research in the long run.
Hey, that's great advice, and thanks so much for telling us about your research question, your research methods, about what fieldwork has looked like for you and the problems that you've had. I've really appreciated you coming along. So
you're welcome. Okay.
Okay then, keep tuned. We'll talk a bit more about this messy business called research.